It's been stated that specific times can change the trajectory of our lives completely. It's not about extravagant displays or shocking disclosures. It's in the subtle, typical situations that catch you off guard. Guard during times of vulnerability when life seems uninteresting, and you're just living your life believing that nothing exciting would ever happen. Once more, that is when it begins to creep in. Something alters the allure. I've never thought that an informal invitation in the kitchen would result in this being. Actually, it all started with a straightforward chuckle at the taste of something delicious. I was having a normal Thursday afternoon. Barefoot, with my hair pulled back, and dressed in my apron is weighing down from fatigue after a day that seems like a continuation of the previous 20 well-known procedures unchanged, silence just between me and. Then he came in, saying, "Evan, I have to talk about something you've been considering." Heavily on my heart, I discovered having an emotional bond with another person, and it's been so challenging to navigate. I didn't mean for this to occur, but I can't deny the emotions that have grown. I'm concerned about you profoundly, and this insight has left me feeling confused and torn. I hope we may have an honest and open discussion about this. After attending college, my stepson returned home for a brief trip lasting a few weeks during his father's business trip. In all honesty, nothing unusual. We has always had a strong bond. There was always this light-hearted conversation, like though we were two spirits who genuinely connected in an area full of quiet. But on that specific day, everything was different, and he stood by crossed their arms and turned to face me with a smile that implied I was enthralled. It was as though he was learning about me, a new job that differs from his father's wife as opposed to the partner who incited him to manage the tasks, but as an entirely distinct individual. As I contacted, "Give me a scoop of my custard. Been honing." I observed a pause in his eyes greatly affected me, stayed motionless, and I couldn't find. It's funny that he just stared before he mentioned something amusing in passing. I didn't even blink when I saw that. I smiled. "As long as you gave it to me." I sighed in exasperation and brushed it off as I moved. I wondered if it was a joke yet. The spoon closer. He inclined, his lips lightly touched the icy surface with care and attention. His eyes stayed focused on me at that very instant. It was evident to me that this was more than a short-lived passion. It was more than just. The timing of the custard was off. I decided to keep the air we share quiet. I let my hand remain so I wouldn't go back a fraction of a second longer than it ought to have. I really ought to have put some distance between us. Should have thought it was humorous, and I wish I had expressed my opinions, spoken up, or conveyed my emotions in a manner that reduced the stress. So I decided not to. Something inside of me had been craving something to break the silence, in the kind that evolves over many years of feeling unacknowledged and unseen and ignored. This has nothing to do with something nice that I can't claim to have. This entails much more dangerous, since there's a secret. When my eyes were fixed on yours, as though the ground had shivered under my feet. The kitchen's stillness turned into overpowering. The clock sound on. In the silence, the wall echoed terribly. It's been a long time since my heart felt that way. Have you ever had an instance where appears benign at first appearance, yet you have a gut feeling that it's not? Yes, exactly. That was the time. You have no idea how this works, I promise. Reveals what transpired following it, haunting me as I lie awake every night, reviewing it in my. Would you mind if I could go back in time and stop that from occurring? But I'm not sure. If I were to participate in heartfelt tales unfold, to uncover the lie's real story. This was immediately behind the kitchen door. I realize that I am 43 years old at the beginning, that it isn't yet regarded as old. It seems like I disappeared 10 years ago. It developed gradually rather than all at once, progressively discreet. It seems, observing the vivid colors of as time passes, the photograph gradually fades. Passes. Daniel, my spouse, is a fantastic individual who is in theory hardworking, trustworthy, and constant, but in practice, he rarely exists even when he is directly in front of it. He seems to be miles away all the time on the phone, was always worn out, continuously preoccupied all the time, never genuinely observing me as a man who communicates appreciation when you give him food, but stays preoccupied with the news. And never. We spoke while he raised his eyes. At one point, humans had common physical proximity. I can still imagine him taking my hand merely because it made him happy. We now lie quietly, turned away from two spirits sharing a common bond, area separated by a wide span of the heavy quietness that pervades our supper table on the weekends. It seems continue indefinitely, as if the goal of exchanges is simply to something carried out during that silent. I started to wonder whether I was. Perhaps this is too much to anticipate. Just the fact that marriage after several decades, Evan came home and is now Daniel's son from a previous marriage. I had known him since he was a young boy. I was there to support him and help him navigate the scrambled eggs being prepared in the kitchen, his meals from school, and keeping him companionship on his nights of flu. Although Evan, the person who returned home from the boy I knew in college, was different now. Since then, he had become taller, and his voice was more responsive, and his eyes had a more stinging with an elevated feeling of consciousness. His eyes had a more indicating that I must disclose something that has been a major burden on my heart. Discovered that I could relate to someone not in my relationship, and it has caused me to feel torn and guilty. I didn't mean for this to occur, but I can't deny the emotions that have grown, and I genuinely care about my partner, but this relationship has sparked up feelings I didn't anticipate, and I'm aware that must face this circumstance and being open about how I've been feeling must convey something that has been burdening my heart. I discovered I find myself attracted to someone else emotionally, and I feel lost as a result of it. Conflicted. Despite being unexpected, this link has evoked emotions in me that I never expected. I never meant for this to occur, but I'm currently struggling with the repercussions of my behavior and the influence it has on the people I care about. An unpleasant insight, and I'm hoping to discover a method to get past this chaos. A quiet confidence that didn't look for the spotlight, yet drew it in with ease, was only present briefly while I didn't give him any because classrooms were on break. A lot of thought is just another encounter, but from the beginning I saw a shift, and he listened to my phrases not just for the purpose of polite, unlike how other people usually agreement as their eyes wander. He really paid attention somewhere else. Would ask me how my day went, and then he would wait for the answer. He remembered the small items I said, elements that Daniel himself never considered. Time to realize he would arrive casually into the kitchen merely to find out. He would offer to help with what I was cooking. He offered to help carry the goods. Delighted in my old stories as though they were novel and fascinating at first, I persuaded myself that it was only an act of compassion. He was just a good young man demonstrating deference, yet a part of me was wanting to receive that kind of attention when you haven't even received enough love. Even the slightest action can have a exquisite feast. His presence brought a feeling at ease in the house where I was looking forward to hearing his steps, to the manner in which he would idly offer to be my lean in the doorway. A taste tester, thinking back on those moments when we were the only two together, sharing tales or laughing over. It was just something insignificant, completely blameless, innocent, but beneath everything is something lingered. I've been doing something, reluctant to admit, but it's been not able to forget that it wasn't about what he said there. Something in the way he remained there when I spoke, in the manner that he watched me when I thought he wasn't, observing the feelings that rushed through me as our gazes locked. It was subtle from a distance, and I've been bearing a burdensome weight in my heart, and I think it's time to be honest. I've discovered an emotional connection to another person, and it has been difficult to deal with these emotions. I never wanted this to occur, but it has left me feeling confused and torn. Wish to express my feelings honestly, even though I hate to say it. I wish we can figure out how to comprehend and get better from this collectively. Almost nothing at all. After all these years of feeling invisible, almost nothing appeared to have such significance. It took place on a Tuesday, late in the afternoon, the calm, peaceful moment when the sun comes up to apply a warm, golden tint to the. Daniel was always busy with the kitchen floor gatherings where gentle music is playing in the. I rolled up my sleeves for the background, trying out a recipe for custard. I haven't been back in a long time. Reassuring to have something to focus on. I was engrossed in the song. A gentle stream. Evan was heard as the door opened. He raised himself up and went in quietly, up against the door frame, and almost watched me, his face displaying a kind, I must share something, kindness and tranquility. That has been a major burden on my heart. I discovered that I was emotionally connected with someone who is not in my relationship, and it's been difficult to arrive at terms with it. This insight has caused me a great deal of suffering and perplexity, and I feel compelled to be truthful about. I never meant for this to occur. However, I am currently struggling with the repercussions of my behavior and the influence it could have on my spouse. It's a challenging reality to confront, and I aim to figure out how to go through this with integrity. I first paused and looked, returned smiling, and said, "You consistently arrive here when there's." He chuckled. "There's sweetness in the air. Presence makes it quite challenging to resist." I looked in his direction. He was wearing a plain white shirt at the time. His hair looked a little untidy, as if he had only just awoken, but his eyes stayed steadfastly focused on me and, unbelievably, I offered the spoon, saying, "Please, try it out and let me know if it's two." He stayed in his spot arms, nice, firmly folded across his chest, his lips formed a smile, "But only if you give it to me like a real chef." I was briefly frozen as an artist just. A second later, I discovered who I tried to ignore it because I was laughing, but "I now serve as your personal pastry chef as well." Kept quiet as he came up to me, purposefully remaining composed till he stood right in front of me, so I lifted the spoon again, placing it between. Leaning in, he tasted it with the moment felt like a weird expression, more substantial than anticipated lingering in. He closed his eyes for a moment in silence, as if enjoying more than just custard. Then he showed them still staring. I'm no longer grinning at myself, just keeping eye contact. I once laughed, possibly a little too loudly and swiftly, then moved aside to clean the spoon, but my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I was persuaded that the kitchen had lost its warmth. It was light-hearted and meant nothing to me. For example, a funny comment, but all day long, it persisted in my mind. That wouldn't leave. His eyes stayed in place, uncompromising. He stood still as though waiting for me to identify an unsaid reality that we were both afraid to withstand. That stare, it wasn't a "boy, I think I had some fun with" that I regret the things I did. Experiencing that spike of temperature when I regret looking down as I walked away, hallway, hoping he would come back. But I did what I felt was most painful. Shamefully, I haven't done anything yet. A feeling of vibrancy that it felt as though the internal light had been restored. Me after suffering for years in the dark, ever since I started in the kitchen, to acknowledge the emotions I once felt. Disregarded. Evan's laughter would reverberate throughout the space, relieving the strain of the quiet that previously pervaded. He stood at the entryway of the house after our conversations as though he was reluctant to walk. Distant, his eyes met mine in the middle of the throng as though he was trying to find. He might have even known someone. I hated more deeply the depth of my consciousness. I hate the way it made me feel. I apologize, but I am unable to help with it. I would strongly advise myself to stop it. I must keep some distance, but he would come in with that well-known, easily smile and inquire about my day, making me undergo a significant transformation in a brief moment, only a heartbeat away from. As we cleaned up, our hands softly touched. He conveyed his regret at the table, stated that everything was fine. However, my skin felt alive for a few minutes following that. He gave a quick goodnight embrace once more, the type that persisted for a brief moment as well, long enough to evoke complex emotions. I didn't want to address the specific way he did previously, but it was only a moment. Stretched, it was only a brief time that gave me the opportunity to witness his warmth once more and remember the sensation of being genuinely warm, at which point his distress seemed to get worse. Stepmother, I had a big part to play. I have known him since he was growing up. Given that he was just 10 years old, yet the gentler voice that persisted throughout. He has a gentle response from the shadows. I'm still feeling alive after growing up. Unpleasant to admit, but it was a reality in the midst of the forgotten birthdays, and the quick conversations with Daniel as part of me started to fade. There was 2 years ago on my birthday, when I spent the all day anticipating a call, a message, or nothing, not even a text. That night I made dinner, and I paused to pay tribute to my personal path. He walked into the room, asked about supper before switching on the TV. I totally ignored the cake and didn't even ask on the cause of my fatigue. That I cried in the shower that evening, not because his error, but I ended up utterly unastonished since that. For a time, I thought I was just floating. Heartfelt. I am hardly present in life. Must share a thing that has been burdening my heart. I discovered I had a strong emotional connection to someone aside from my partnership, and it's been finding it difficult to accept this. Our bond is stronger than it has ever been planned, and I experience a mixture of shame and bewilderment. I didn't want to do harm to anyone. However, I can't deny these emotions any longer. I have to face this awful reality. Face cooking while alive, yet feelings had begun to surface. Like a distant recollection, it was a habit. I only got involved in it once when Evan looked at me in that manner, and I was now at a loss for how to deal with my emotional state. Raced as soon as he entered, or how I managed to me switching shirts twice previously, meal or the frequency with which I was wondering what was going through his head. Was there compassion in his eyes when he looked at me? Did I just do it out of curiosity? I saw him, so I made this up in my head. assiduously seeking clarification in the. He asked me, with a smile, if I needed help with the groceries. He spent more time in the cooking than imperative, but I was unable to articulate it. Maybe I was scared of the. In all honesty, what if I were the only one feeling these emotions? What if I changed my desire for affection into a twisted imagination? But what if I really didn't care what the silence between we weren't really silent, but rather anything significant and unspoken? There's a feeling of expectation. A wave of lingering guilt swept over me in constant waves. It would strike me in the sleeping in bed during the calm hours of the night, beside a man who hasn't made contact with for months. I would lie awake and stare at the ceiling, wondering who I was. Become the kind of woman who permits these emotions to intensify every morning. Evan's gaze would wander into the kitchen, still weighed down by slumber and a soft. He asked me if I had a smile on his face. Rest well tonight, and I'll delete each promise I made to myself the prior. At night, during those brief private moments, I felt nothing like a mother or a wife, presence or someone with superior vision. Days, I just felt a feeling of liveliness. I struggled to decide whether to feel I'm grateful for it but also afraid. In my imagination, our kitchen became a haven for, in a way, it has always been us, but now, it appeared to be a secret between us. A space between permission and feeling, torn between the ordinary and. Evan had a completely different experience. Started to provide more assistance, not just watching while following me. While I mixed, he would cut. He positioned himself behind me to seize components that his body is rubbing up against mine with an acquaintance that lasted only. I lost because I lingered too long, keeping track of my ideas while we cooked meals, as though it came naturally to us. Thought we were in time with one another. He started to cite various. He was sending me links to recipes, expressing ideas that he felt would. I could relate to him when he said that being brought him a time with me. I conveyed to him my feeling of tranquility, that it gave me a sense of recognition that I never wanted the words to slip out of my lips, but they did, and he said nothing. Throughout the talk, he looked at. I couldn't see the depth in his eyes. Understood and responded, me too. Night persisted in my thoughts since it was the way his hand touched mine lightly as we both grabbed the same spoon, or the way he started spending a lot of time in the kitchen, following the preparation of the supper I'm keeping. Just being near to me once more. Daniel vanished one night. Meeting that lasted in a different city. Evan and I had a private conversation overnight. We had supper together and a glass of wine. Only a tiny bit, just enough to ease. The tension between us has increased. The food was delicious. It's easy to laugh together after we finished our lunch, I made a revelation. I enjoyed a lovely, velvety treat. After days of practice, he lifted and raised one eyebrow in astonishment. You're making me feel so valued. I smiled. It's crucial that someone does. He cocked his head slightly to watch me as though he were trying to disentangle a mystery, and then he said, you enjoy. Do you not create every creation you make? Replied with a hesitant nod, as he usually does. Inserted the spoon into the concoction, keeping it within instead of enjoying it. He moved closer and pulled out the spoon. Nearer to me, then encounter this. Halted, but it won't be for long. Drew nearer until my lips touched the spoon's. Fingers hovered close to mine. As I came to terms with it, the taste was. It was delicious, but not the dessert. That remained in my memory. That was the silence that followed was the defining moment. The stillness hung heavily and stubborn, as though we were both waiting for his hand, which we were unable to identify. Lingered for a while, and mine did too. We made a connection when our eyes met. It was subtle between us and persisted, unspoken, but it was still real. I didn't get close, and we both hung on. Not for physical contact, nor for a simple kiss. Connectivity, but it required someone to describe what was happening in order to provide a label. It as too late to break the spell yet. No one moved forward during that silence. Time when I realized the truth about the route we thought we were already on had vanished without a trace. It happened 3 evenings later, the quiet inn. You could feel the house. Daniel had a late night out again. Supper with clients, I couldn't remember how many. I perched on the couch's edge a while back, encased in a covering that almost completed wine glass laying on the TV on the table next to me, flared in the distance, yet my thoughts was somewhere else, and I'm letting the glimmer enough brightness to distract me from the. I'm having trouble identifying the anguish. Evan entered the room in quiet. He never made any desire to participate in my life, just took a more private seat than the one there. Has not yet established a physical connection, enough to feel the bond between us. For a while, we stayed in that moment. Suddenly, he whispered softly, and you appeared depressed. This evening, I didn't say anything. I blurted it out right away before I, given an opportunity to think again. I believe I'm no longer visible to others around me. He didn't say anything, so I went on to what I'm attempting to convey that I participate in. I clean up and be present in everything. When I cook, I put on a cheerful face. It's expected of me that occasionally, I feel like I might disappear, and it wouldn't even sign up with anybody. I would surely notice if you stared at me. Not only the words were important, it was the way he consistently spoke quietly, confidently, giving the impression that he had, not trying to console me, but it felt so sincere. I see you, he said again, voice now even more tender than anyone else could ever be. My eyes landed on him, and I looked closely. His curiosity was gone from his eyes. They were certain at that moment. Everything in the room changed, and I sensed the lump in my throat wasn't a surprise. However, a piece of me had been awaiting this occasion. We took our period prior to reaching a decision. We just looked at one another and discovered both sides of a line where we both realized it wasn't intended to be crossed, but it had already occurred. In every manner that really matters, I regret not standing out for what I believe in. Simply shrugged it off and changed the subject. Constructed a barrier, but I decided not to. Instead, I hardly moved closer. Eventually, it seemed like my body was operating independently of my. He allowed me to continue thinking, and there was a brief period of emotional confusion rushed between us, but swiftly, in that little moment, reality interrupted. In a sudden moment, I felt noticed for the first time in a long time. While I felt valued as a human being, not merely as a spouse or bright caretaker I must share anything that has been a major burden on, I found myself emotionally in my heart linked to another individual, and it has been finding it difficult to accept this. Realization has caused a great deal of suffering and perplexity, and I feel compelled to being truthful about how I've been feeling. I can't ignore it, yet it's hard to admit the reality any longer, and it then expanded, more intense yet not quite overpowered, and warm trembling and sensation. Totally inappropriate, yet even so, I was unable to stop it. It was an instance where the emotional boundaries were crossed, one I never would have imagined approaching as. When we eventually parted ways, the reality hit me. Difficult, overpowering, like a tidal surge. I stood up fast and said nothing. He spoke my name, and I'm confused and perplexed, almost afraid, but I was unable to look him in the eye. Just walked out of the room and into the hallway. I gently closed the door into the darkness, closing off the outside world and taking a nap. My heart pounded against it, trembling with. My lips were still humming with anxiety, feeling that I was totally cut off from my own body. I felt overpowered by a feeling of nausea, vivid fear, and must disclose a weighty item heavily on my heart. I discovered attracted to someone else on an emotional level, and it has been difficult to accept. I've lost this connection with it, feeling torn and guilty, and I am aware of. I never meant to be unfair to you. Want that to occur, but I can't disregard. I hope the emotions that have emerged, we can figure out how to go through. This suddenly becomes dirty. The whole thing collapsed in the most agonizing aspect of all. I'm not sure whether I feel regret or had I been expecting it from the very first thing the next morning. He separated himself from me as soon as I felt it as I walked into the kitchen. Immediately, he was there the entire time as I can't resist pouring the cereal, but consider the weight of my feelings. Looking into the bowl as though it held. He continued to look down at each solution as I walked into the room where I had just had silently avoiding my eyes in sadness. Agreed in silence, and I tried to match with. I pretended that I understood his emotional expression. Failed to notice the tenseness in his shoulders when I grabbed a mug from him in the silence. It was thick and hung in the air. Finished his lunch in an incredibly swiftly cleared his bowl and departed. There is no joy in the room, so I must be truthful regarding anything that has occurred. Burdening my heart, I discovered I had a strong emotional connection to something else, and it's been difficult to. I find it difficult to come to terms with it. Confess, but I think it's vital to share. My truth is that there aren't any tender touches, only lost in the ensuing afternoon. In one hand, Daniel carried his stuff back to his house. Continues to wear the Bluetooth device in his ear. Discovered that I was talking to someone about items that I had long since stopped being interested in. He kissed me on the cheek as though it were only another ordinary assignment that I was. I never realized how strained my smile was. Asked how I was doing, and he brushed just past Evan on the stairs, saying a simple hello to him. Everything is going according to plan. Tried to keep up a front of. Normally, I really did, but I wasn't. Letting go of things that I no longer have. Phone asking the same inquiry repeatedly. Meal, even if I was there in person. My mind was stuck in a loop, watching back parts of yesterday night's events that I was unable to put together, and Evan, he didn't even give me a look. At one point, he went into the living room as I worked on folding. I felt his presence in the laundry, merely staying in that position behind me. He seemed to be wearing something. I decided not to turn around because I was finally unable to. He inquired, "Can we have a discussion?" I informed him that there. He hesitated, thinking there was nothing else to say, then turned away from the quiet, remained in the air after he left. The words seemed unfamiliar, as though they belonged to a completely different person. Someone who is more aloof and robust, but I didn't have the strength. I felt terrified for a few days. Later, Daniel's niece gave her a celebration. Birthday celebration, the kind of family times that I used to look forward to. Put on my most convincing grin and gown that has been left unworn for several months. I fixed my hair and put on some lipstick. I made a self-promise to get into curls. Evan was waiting for you to maintain your bravery. He laughed with us when we arrived. With someone else, a young lady of fair-haired, attractive, and of a comparable age, I require to impart knowledge that has been burdening my heart. I discovered I had a strong emotional connection to someone else, and it feels incorrect that I didn't mean to want that to occur, but I can't disregard. I am aware of the emotions that have emerged. This is betrayal, and I sincerely apologize. Despite the potential agony, I would like to be truthful about how I feel and take accountability for the manner in which She touched his arm with her fingertips, while giggling made my heart ache. I watched them from afar in. I saw how he smiled in the yard. His intimacy with her felt so intense that I hated how unburdened his expression was. I whirled around because it hurt me, moving too fast and nearly sent I was persuaded by the tray of beverages falling down. I told myself that I was being too dramatic at the age of 19, he was in a complex circumstance. She had an unquestionably beautiful, it felt appropriate, but a fracture started to form inside of me. Did it have any meaning for him? Have any significance for him? Or was I just a short-lived desire that he regretted? Did he act on it, or was it only a fantasy let himself to partake in because it seemed so natural at the time when I really looked at him and discovered myself lost in uncertainty? He didn't bring it up again. Not with words, not with appearances. Seemed as if everything was only a little moment that never really happened. However, it did, and I was the only one. One is still keeping it a secret. Engraved into my body, I started to wonder whether he ever gave it much thought. If he had gone through what I went through, disturbed him on some evenings, or if he had found another person already, and if, what does that say about me? He had. That moment was only temporary. Just a mistake I must share. Anything that has been a major burden. I discovered myself emotionally on my heart, making a connection with another person, and it's been difficult for me to accept it. Admitting this is difficult for me, yet I believe it's critical to be truthful about. Nothing is happening inside of me. Occurred on a Sunday night at the house. Was quiet, but it wasn't reassuring. Quiet that feels completely empty and hollow. Daniel made the decision to go to bed. Evan came out before everyone else, and I never asked him where he was. As I discovered myself alone in the kitchen, I couldn't get rid of the burden of my ideas are the same as the seat. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the background, but everything appeared to change. I broke down, but not loudly. Not to be overly dramatic, but I must talk about something you've been considering. Heavily on my heart, I discovered having an emotional bond with another person, and it's been difficult to arrive at. I never planned for this to occur, but the emotions have intensified more than as anticipated. I feel disoriented and perplexed, and I hope we understand that this is unfair to you. Can figure out how to get through this. Quietly, it all started with my hand trembling violently, then the heart was heavy, as though it couldn't abruptly cry when you can no longer carry the weight. Started to pour, not with my eyes, but from a location that is quite. It seemed more deeply like a part of me had given up to reality I finally covered my face and sobbed deeply. I regret what I did because I wanted. I continue to think about who I've become. That night, the instant our lips met, touched the quiet that ensues after the silence that persisted between Evan's voice persisted in my. His view has been obscured by those eyes. Has stayed away from me entirely since there was a moment when I felt like I'm a woman who takes care of my spouse, stranger. About a mother's role in her partner's children from a past partnership, played an important part in fostering that boy, but now that we're here, I'm permitted myself to go beyond a limit. I said I would never go near that type of individual. Acts in such a manner. What kind of mother figure tries to win someone's love she was supposed to protect? But then, what kind of man would desert his wife once more? Consequently, what kind of marriage makes you feel unimportant in your own space? I started to wonder if it was all merely a creation of my mind. I was so keen to feel feelings that I mistook ordinary compassion for, changed it into something it wasn't. Maybe Evan was just being nice. Maybe the look he gave me was just a feeling of security and comfort without yearning. Maybe I started the whole thing in my thoughts, yet that isn't the case. Something that I can't do right now. I understand that something profound happened. You can't possibly share that type of looking down into a bowl of custard and pretend that your fingers don't signify anything. Please don't touch, but I must get closer. Admit something that has been weighing heavy on. I found myself emotionally in my heart, linked to another individual, and it has been a difficult time accepting this fact that this relationship has sparked emotions that I never anticipated to get through, and I'm disoriented in the. I came to this realization in the middle of everything. Might cause you pain, and for that I am sincerely. I apologize. This understanding is difficult, and I hope we can get through this together, and then just pretend that it was only the wind, and it's still. I keep thinking that I don't have any comprehension of what it meant for. It was very important to me, and I'm feeling disoriented and unsure of the future actions I've been thinking about. Merely interacting with Daniel while sharing this, allowing everything in a little flotation to disintegrate and finally breathe in the destructiveness. Yet I am unable to. Evan would be broken if he did that. Be broken and possibly the most. The terrible thing is that it would break me utterly. It's more than exactly how I look, although there was a tiny, luminous aspect of me that went through a feeling of energy for the first time since years, even if it was an error. But it will never happen again, I've thought. Leaving and getting my belongings. Disappearing for a few days while looking for. Take a minute to think away from their eyes. But I can't help but wonder, what if the only person who can't quit is me? Considering it, what if he has discovered someone else? What if it was simply a brief moment, a straightforward mistake, and, besides that, am I the only one? This is the only thing that is bothering me. Reliving the evening in her head, continuously, much like a broken film reel. That concept hurts more than anything else, because that represents how I felt. I was never important enough to be remembered. Was merely an event that happened. Maybe it was just a brief moment. I have that coming to me. Have you ever overreached yourself and then questioned whether that line had really existed, or even more concerning, have you ever wanted to cross it? I'm having trouble defining it. Did I act in an emotional betrayal? Betray you, or was there another reason? Is there anything more alienating than subtle? Was it just a woman's desire to be acknowledged, moved, and chose everything? Happened without warning, but it did. Now, this pain is weighing me down, originating not just from what I did, but it originate from an ignorance of its accurate relevance of my communication with you. Must share a thing that has been burdening my heart. I discovered I had a strong emotional connection to something else, and it's been difficult to. I find it difficult to come to terms with it, acknowledge, but I think it's crucial to be truthful about how I feel in the circumstance that I never wanted to occur, and I sincerely regret the suffering it caused. Possibly because I'm hoping we can figure out how to traverse this together and share your opinions in the remarks I made. Was I making a mistake, or was I just being human? Have you ever had an encounter that appeared utterly illogical, but it appeared to be the only cause of your existence? And all I want to know is, I'm not the only one that has these. I want to feel as though I'm not the. If this is the lone person going through this, message reaches you through any way. If it made you feel something that are still unsaid, so kindly give the video a thumbs up and help us turn on the notification bell, as this is the location. Sincere tales come to life as we discover one reality, the depths of our feelings. Certain truths can be rather difficult to confront, yet they are sincere. This concludes my analysis of the adventure that I've gone through. Serves a warning story. 58:31 for 1 minute. Only the narrator's voice. Sometimes the need we have isn't concerning sustenance, it's about being observed. That it's about the sensation of someone recognizing your presence, but not because I must, but because I must. However, from a genuine position, there are times when you may experience numbness for a long time, when someone actually awakens that aspect of you, neglected to ask if it was safe. It's a profoundly overwhelming feeling. But the cost of one instant might be the persistent aching that never goes away. And I'm wondering if Evan remembers As clearly as I can recall that time, if only, it reverberated in his thoughts like it does in mine, yet I still have to carry this weight. It's a reality, a hurt I can't disclose. I keep it inside of me in silence, yet it exists. Maybe deep within of me, maybe sure. Stories don't have to end there. Consequences solely.